Hello and welcome to Real Opinions, and today I'm going to be reviewing The Shape of Water, which, as of the time of recording, has just won Best Film at the Oscars. So I saw it when it first came out, but my review is now going to be kind of coloured by the fact that it has become such a phenomenon. But at the same time, because I love the film so much, that's not really going to affect what I have to say, because I always thought this film was great, and I still think that this film is great, and I'm very, very happy that Guillermo del Toro, who's one of my favourite filmmakers, has finally got a real success story, because I think it is such a shame that it's taken so long for audiences to catch on, because he has made some brilliant pieces of work that really do deserve more recognition, and I hope that this leads to him getting a bit more freedom and getting more projects out there. So that's where I will begin with. This film is very good, and I'm a very, very big Guillermo del Toro fan. So if you're looking for some kind of revisionist take or some kind of backlash to the Oscar win, you're not getting it here, because I think this film is a masterpiece. So in case you don't know what it's about, it's set in Cold War era Baltimore, and it's about this isolated mute woman who works at a confidential government facility. For the most part, her existence is really mundane. We watch her routine and it's like the most depressingly dull, ordinary thing. But that all changes when a tightly wound government agent, played by Michael Shannon, delivers a new asset to the facility that she works in. One that is mysteriously encased in this sturdy water container. Although the project that he's working on is initially shrouded in secrecy, Eliza, the janitor, her curiosity gets the better of her, and she discovers that the resident within the tank is actually an amphibious humanoid fishman, played by Doug Jones, a Guillermo del Toro regular. And after a series of clandestine secret encounters, she develops a bond with the creature and comes to realize that he is both intelligent and empathetic, and so she plots to break him free using her insider knowledge of the facility. And she recruits her friends, including her neighbor, played by Richard Jenkins, and her co-worker, played by Octavia Spencer. She recruits them into her plan to break this thing free. So as I said at the opening, I think Guillermo del Toro is responsible for some of the most enthralling films of the last 10 or 20 so years. But until now, I do think he's only had one masterpiece under his belt, and that is Pan's Labyrinth, which is a truly remarkable piece of work. One that's overflowing with mesmerizing imagery, compelling storytelling, and some of the most arresting sequences in all of cinema. I mean, that Pale Man sequence still blows my mind, and I've seen it 1,000 times. And that film was, of course, released to critical acclaim. I think it was nominated for a Best Foreign Film Oscar, and it's a magnificent tour de force. I'll stop gushing about Pan's Labyrinth, I promise, but my point is that since then, Guillermo del Toro hasn't been able to kind of reach those same heights. He's made some very entertaining films, some very interesting films, but nothing that ever touches that level, that Pan's Labyrinth level of quality. And the reason that I've made that point is because I think that The Shape of Water is the closest he's come to capturing the magic of Pan's Labyrinth since. I really do think this film is a breathtaking triumph, beautifully conceived, immaculately constructed on a technical level, and rife with just pure, uncynical emotion. It's the closest that Del Toro has ever come to equaling his magnum opus, and I think it pulls together all of his strengths into one stunning package that, if you're a fan of his work, you're gonna absolutely love it. And judging by the film's reception, I think that even if you're not a fan of his work, you might like it too, because it's a crowd pleaser. It's a beautiful fairy tale love story with comedy, with horror, with suspense, with great performances, with great writing. It's a very hard film, I think, to not like, because it's got everything with it. So I think even if you're not a fan of Guillermo del Toro, this is probably going to tick some boxes for you as well, because it pulls off, I think, so many different things. There's bound to be something you'll like. It's like a violent version of Beauty and the Beast. So people who like romance or fairy tales, I think they're going to like it. People who like art house things, it's got elements for them. People who like violent films, it's got things for them. I just feel like there's gonna be something you'll connect to. So I truly believe that even the most ardent of skeptics will be won over by the time the credits roll. And a lot of that's to do with how sincere and tender it just feels from a directing standpoint. You feel Guillermo del Toro's love in every frame, in every image, and in every performance. I think the most important thing is for me actually is something that's gone a little under the radar and hasn't received as much praise as I think it should, is the screenwriting. I think it does a great job of explaining all of the characters' motivations, even when some of it's quite out there. It convinces you that this woman could fall in love with a creature. It shows you why. It shows you what they share. It shows you what they have to bond over, and it shows you why she wouldn't find it weird, and it convinces you as an audience member. And that could have been a fatal stumbling block. If that wasn't achieved so well, I think it would have lost a lot of people, because they'd be like, this is weird, she wants to bang a fish, what is this all about? But I think it's so well developed that you do go along with it. And that same thoughtfulness and astuteness applies, I think, to every element of the story and every character. Even the most minor characters in this film are given comprehensive motivations and intricate personalities. I don't remember the last time that I saw a film that juggled so many different people, so many different subplots, and yet still managed to define them all so clearly and with so much depth. Everyone feels so fleshed out and detailed with their own backgrounds and domestic lives and everything like that. And it's really quite impressive that it's all condensed into what is basically just a 2-hour film. It feels like it could have been a TV show. There's that much complexity for everyone involved. The last time I remember something feeling this well written in that sense is probably Birdman. On that note, it has been alleged that Guillermo del Toro wrote 40 pages of backstory for each cast member, which they could then choose to either incorporate into their work or just jettison it and ignore it entirely. And I think it's really telling, because I think you can see that on the screen. Because even when it doesn't show you someone's backstory, you can feel like it's there from the performance or from just little references in dialogue. So everyone feels like a real person. Even the tiniest supporting cast member feels like a person rather than just someone who's there to interact with the main character. Naturally, I think the cast deserve a lot of praise for that. Sally Hawkins, obviously most of all. She's consistently relatable, even when she's thinking about boning a scaly amphibian. So that's high praise from me. You convinced me, Sally. And she also, I think she rises to the challenge of playing a woman who's not only mute, but also quite timid. It feels like she's hindered by two things. She is both a character who can't speak, but also a very restrained character. And that could have been difficult for a lot of actresses, I think. But she pulls it off really well. And I think she works with those limitations incredibly. There's one moment, it's basically the Oscar clip, where she has like a silent monologue that she delivers through sign language, and it is every bit as powerful as the usual Oscar speech. You know, like Gary Oldman in The Darkest Hour when he gives his big acty speech. I thought that this was actually more compelling and enthralling, just watching her deliver this sign language monologue that was really, really passionate and powerful. And everyone else puts in incredible work too, from Richard Jenkins, who is always brilliant. He supplies a welcome dose of levity and pathos. And there's Michael Stuhlbarg, who plays this conflicted scientist. He's also really good. And debatably, I think the most impressive performance actually comes from the often underutilized Michael Shannon. He often feels like an actor who could be great and could be really intense, but the material he's working with rarely allows him to do that. Like if you think of Man of Steel, I think that he could have been as good for Zod as Heath Ledger was for the Joker, but he was working with a script that didn't allow him to do that. But here it feels like he's like unleashed and just let off the tether. He capitalizes on that intensity that I think he always had the potential for, and I think he is every bit as intimidating as you would imagine given that. But as well as that, his character is also strangely kind of pathetic and insecure. He's constantly trying to prove himself and fill this ambiguous void in his life. It's kind of like what people talk about with toxic masculinity. Someone who's so desperate to be a proper man that it's kind of sad. And I think he pulls that element off well too. He's not just a scary asshole. You sort of feel not sorry for him, but you pity him. You think he's kind of pathetic in the way that he's just so insecure and so desperate to be like his ideal conception of a man. The monster, of course, as well, is a very, very important character, and the film does, to an extent, rest on his shoulders, even though he's not in it as much as you might think. But it's Doug Jones, which basically is a guarantee of quality when it comes to creature performance. And he's assisted by some truly phenomenal VFX work, which goes a long way to making him feel real. I would say real, because rather than choosing between either exclusively CGI or exclusively practical, Del Toro shrewdly chooses to go with a full body prosthetic, which he then augments seamlessly with just tiny, tiny details of digital manipulation like eyelids. And that's the best kind of approach, but when it's done poorly, it can almost call attention to itself, because you sit there playing a game of spot the CGI effect, or spot when it's real, spot when it's not. But here, because it's done so seamlessly, you stop thinking about it. A bit like the more recent Planet of the Apes films, you just stop being amazed and just feel like you're watching a real character. Of course, as is to be expected from Del Toro, the entire production is a visual marvel as well, with certain flourishes that will linger in the mind for days. There's an extreme close-up at one point on a raindrop as it travels across a bus window, and it's hypnotic. It's truly hypnotic. It helps that he has a real intuition for assembling a team who are capable of understanding his vision and getting on the same page of him, and then bringing it to life. And I think that's evident from the technical Oscars it won, like the production design, which is amazing in the way that it combines Guillermo del Toro's flair for the fantastical and the period details from the 1960s. I thought it was a shoo-in for production design. I'm very glad it won. And he's also got a great cinematographer in Dan Louston working with him, with a really beautiful color scheme, lighting, all of that stuff. It just looks so perfect, and it's complemented perfectly as well by Alexandre Desplat, who also rightly won the Oscar for his note-perfect musical accompaniment. It's a tranquil score, but it's also refreshingly melodic. It's one that you can actually remember. Like, every time they played it at the Oscar ceremony, I found myself humming it afterwards. It's actually one that doesn't just feel like background noise. It feels like music that was meant to be remembered, which is rare these days for a melodic score. Everything's all effects-driven or textural. You know, most directors want music to not take away from the film and not call attention to itself, but Del Toro has let Alexandre Desplat actually do something for once. Overall, I think this is just a tremendously crafted film, and it's also an emotionally affecting one. There are so many great moments. There's fantastic instances of tension. There's a fun little heisty caper sequence. There's genuinely striking moments of violence. Sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's uplifting, sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's poignant, sometimes it's a little bit scary. It's often very weird. There's a prolonged discussion about fish penis at one point. It does everything so well. And that's thanks to excellent direction, excellent craftsmanship all round from all the technical elements, a brilliant cast, and a screenplay that lets everyone have their moment to shine, with great dialogue and just great individual scenes as well. I love this film, and I think from now on, any future thing that Del Toro produces is going to be living in both the shadow of Pan's Labyrinth and now this. They're going to have to live up to 2 masterpieces instead of just one. He's set the bar incredibly high yet again, and I could not be happier. I think that this was the most deserving Best Picture win in quite a while, and I loved it, and it would get a 10 out of 10 from myself. Thank you. I'm sure that there will be some people who came here wanting wanting the film to be taken down a peg or two because it just won, but I can't lie, I loved it. It was definitely my favorite nominee. And yeah, if you love the film too, say something in the comments. I don't know, I'm not really good at this whole audience engagement thing. Everyone else does it so seamlessly. Whenever I do it, it feels so forced. You know what, instead, why don't you just tell me if you thought I was wrong and call me a knobhead?